Hello everyone, welcome to this lecture, the third part of this lecture today, which is on data visualization. So the aim is for us to understand how to actually illustrate quantitative information which we've collected or obtained, and this is a really essential way to portray a narrative which we develop about the particular area of research which we're focusing on. So visualization is essential because it enables us to make testable statements about how the world works, or hypotheses. And here I've just demonstrated that exploratory data analysis utilizes visualization techniques and helps us to develop rapidly hypotheses that then we're able to test and iterate with until we were able to draw conclusions which we're able to communicate to a wider audience. This is a graphic which I've taken out of a book by Hadley Wickham, I very much recommend that you potentially look at it. So I actually have it here. It's called R for Data Science, and Hadley is really one of the main people involved in developing packages in the R ecosystem. So he's responsible for the tidyverse, which you'll hear about within this term. That's the name for all of the packages which he's created. Within that, there's lots of individual packages such as ggplot2 or tidyr, and that enables you to cleanse data and then to visualize it. So here I really just emphasize that you're able to import data, tidy it up, transform it, examine it visually by actually plotting different charts. You might model it, and then you can iterate through that process lots of times because obviously research is iterative. And then finally, you can communicate those findings. So do check out Hadley, and particularly that book if you're able to get your hands on it. It's a relatively gentle introduction to R. I really like this quote by John Tukey, and that's essentially that the simple graph has brought more information to the data analyst's mind than any other device. And I think that that's really key. I think the classic quote is that a picture's worth 1,000 words. And I think that that's probably the truth here. I know with the work that I've done, being able to produce attractive looking graphics that's able to demonstrate the statistics of the data which has been analyzed is a really powerful way to portray the information. And if you're able to do that, which hopefully you'll be able to do at the end of the course, then you'll be able to have a very successful career in industry or in government because you're able to illustrate the key issues that you're trying to tease out of the data. So do look up John Tukey as well. So he's a very prestigious mathematician. He's actually the creator of the box plot as well, which is a type of graph which shows some key descriptive statistics. So it includes the ability to show the range, the median, the interquartile range, and that's a powerful graph which we'll probably cover later in this course. I think one of the issues that I really struggled with when I started statistics was actually understanding which plot I should be using for a particular circumstance. And at that time, I didn't have a framework to understand how to go about choosing these graphs, and often it felt a bit like you had to go through trial and error to work out whether the graph that you produced was correct or not. And that was really quite frustrating early on. So as a consequence, in this course, particularly this lecture today, I'm drawing your attention to this infographic, which can help you choose the appropriate plot based on your data. So here it emphasizes that there are these 4 different dimensions which relate how you then portray that data. So it's asking you, well, what would you like to show? Is it a distribution? Is it a composition? Is it a relationship? Is it a comparison within the data which you have? And I'm going to give you examples here of different graphs that can be used and applied. And then we're going to pick some of those up in the lab practical. So I'm going to start with distributions because that's fairly central to the work that we're doing. It also fits in with the course structure, focusing on descriptive statistics within the early weeks of the course. So here you can see the type of plot that you might choose depends on whether you have a single variable with lots of data points or just a few, and then whether you have multiple variables, so it's 2 or 3. And today I'm going to focus more on the single variable and 2 variables. You can start to introduce 3, 4, 5 variables in the plots that you do, but then you have to put a lot more thought into how you portray that data because it does get harder. I mean, I know some people who don't really like 3D plots, as it's demonstrating down here, because you need to know how to interpret them. But actually, you can get a lot onto a standard 2D plot, as I will show you, if you're also using color, shape, size, for example, or the shape of a point. And therefore, there's lots of ways that you can start to introduce different dimensions into just a standard 2D plot. Okay, so what's a histogram? Well, a histogram is the name for a plot which basically illustrates the frequency of values, essentially as bars. So often you might have to aggregate this information in order to show the histogram. So let me just show you what that looks like. If you look at the graphic just here, on the x-axis we have the age of a group of individuals. Let's just say that this is a sample of the population. And then on the y-axis we have the number of individuals which is within that age category. And you'll see here that the age categories are between 20, 30, 40, 50, so they're going up in increments of 10 years. And the list of data that I showed you at the beginning, they are essentially the underlying values that have created that plot. So I just wanted to show you that this is what the data probably would look like before you plotted it, and I put each of the data values on a new row depending on which category it is in. So if you can see there, we've got 2 values in the 20 to 30 category. And then when we look at that data here, you can see if you go to the 2030 category, you have a frequency of 2 for that particular group. And that information that you get could also be in a table as well as a dictionary. But essentially, this is the type of structure that you would have for a histogram if you were just visualizing the distribution of a single variable. Now let's think about 2 different variables that you might want to think of. So here we show 1. Actually, here I'm going to show 2, so we have one on the x-axis and one on the y-axis. I've been doing a piece of work recently for Facebook research, which has been very interesting. So actually, the research question there was, well, how many Wi-Fi hotspots are there? And in this case, the study area was in central London. Now, I'm assuming that pretty much all of you have one of these. So every time you log onto your smartphone and you access the internet, if you're out and about, you're probably on the cellular network, probably on 4G or 5G. If you're at home or you're on a campus, or if you're at the coffee shop, then you're probably on Wi-Fi. And therefore, this is one of the key technologies for how we connect to the internet. The issue, like many parts of the internet, is that it's not managed by any one individual. There's no overarching understanding of how many Wi-Fi hotspots there are, or where all of the internet assets are. It's very different to the transport system, where you may have a centralized planner. And that causes some problems, and that's one reason why I've been working on this research problem. So we're actually able to sense the number of Wi-Fi hotspots just using a standard Google Pixel phone, so an Android device, where I have an application on it which is able to record all the number of Wi-Fi hotspots that I can sense when I walk down a street. Okay, so imagine then that I either walk, cycle, or I drive around central London collecting lots of data on here, and I have the Wi-Fi name and I have the latitude and longitude coordinates, so I'm able to create some geospatial information out of that data that I collect. And then when I actually start to plot all of that data and use some statistical boundaries, I'm able to relate the number of Wi-Fi hotspots that I've collected, which is here on the y-axis, to the building count, so the number of buildings in a particular area. And this is for an urban area. So essentially the pattern here is that generally as the number of buildings increases, so do the number of Wi-Fi hotspots, which is logical. But you can see that I've been able to plot that data. So essentially, I've aggregated the number of buildings in each area into buckets. So we have between 0 and 15 buildings here. And approximately, there's generally about 100 Wi-Fi hotspots based on that number of buildings across the sample which I took. And then we can go up in density all the way up to 135 to 150 buildings, where we have over 500 Wi-Fi hotspots based on the data that I collected here. So this is just a way for us to start to create histograms where we've got two different types of data. And actually what's nice about this is that I'm also able to show the variability across the statistical areas where I collected the data. And that's shown by the size of the black bar, which represents the variance around the mean. So that's what we call the confidence interval. I'll be going into this later in the course, so don't worry about it. But essentially, we're able to get the relationship by collecting all of this data between different building count densities and the number of Wi-Fi hotspots. So if I wanted to later build a predictive model, I could say, well, if there's this many buildings in an area, I could estimate how many Wi-Fi hotspots there are using the relationship that we demonstrate here. So this is a really nice way to show data. And I think it also helps to portray the message fairly simply. It's not too complicated. So I'm generally a fan of using histograms in this way. So that was showing the distribution across one or two variables. What happens now if we want to show the composition? So let's take a bar plot. So this is an example of a bar plot from an analysis which I did for the costs of rolling out 5G. So many of you may be aware that 5G rollouts are now taking place around the world, which means hopefully you can get faster internet. So essentially in this plot here, I've modeled the cost for rolling out 5G to urban, suburban and rural areas, and you can see the cost here. So that's the number of euros, millions of euros on the y-axis that would be required to cover that particular settlement pattern. So generally costs are lower in urban areas, and then they generally get higher in rural areas, and that's because in urban areas you've got lots of people and the area is usually smaller, so the costs due to economies of scale are spread across more users. Whereas in rural areas, you've got fewer people and therefore the infrastructure cost is much larger. Anyway, the point is that we're able to show the actual composition of the cost within these bars. So here in rural, it's 177 million euros that would be required in order to provide 5G to that entire area in the Netherlands that this study focused on. And we're able to see how much of that is based on different cost factors. So here, this red block refers to the radio access network. So you don't need to worry about what that is. Just imagine when you connect to your cell phone, you're actually connecting to the cell sites. For example, on campus at GMU, there's a big cell site, and the cost of delivering that cell site is the size of, say, this red block. And then the orange part of that might be how much it costs to actually install the site. And the lighter part down here is how much it actually costs to then have a connection which connects that site into the actual internet. So what I'm demonstrating here, going back to the original point, is that we're able to show the composition of the cost, both the gross magnitude, but also then how much the cost relates to each individual factor. And that's a really powerful thing. So this is just a very small, simple example here. But you could show this across lots of different dimensions so that you could understand the costs of rolling out 5G to urban, suburban, or rural areas, so how they actually spread out across space. So we were actually asked to carry out this analysis for the government of the Netherlands, so the Ministry of Economic Affairs, and that was a very interesting project to carry out. So you can read the paper if you're interested in the statistical analysis that we did there. It's more simulation-based modeling, but we have the nice data visualizations which are relevant for this piece here. So if you look here on the right-hand side, we have the distribution of population in the Netherlands. So essentially that's for urban areas, suburban areas, and rural areas. And really that's what I was demonstrating using those categories before. So if we just move forward here, this is the same plot that you saw before, but I only showed you a portion of it. You can actually, as a consequence, show many different dimensions of the data set that you might want to show. So for example, here we have plots representing across the x-axis, the actual scenarios that we tested within the model, and then also on the y-axis we have the different strategies that we tested for deployment for 5G. And I don't want to get too bogged down in the content here. I just want to demonstrate that actually you can show the composition of this data across a variety of different dimensions just using 2D plots if you think carefully about how you actually create and visualize the underlying trends. Okay, great. So that was the composition factor. Let's think now about relationships. So here we have either scatter plots or bubble charts. I think that this is quite simplified here, so it emphasizes that maybe you're just showing 2, 3 variables. In reality, as I mentioned before, you can show more. So this is just an example of how we're showing 3 variables. So this is a classic data set which is used to provide many examples in R. And it's actually on the petal width of plants. So here we can see that for 3 different species, the petal length, so the length of the petal and the width of the petal are plotted against each other. And then from this graph that we've created, we're able to understand that generally there's a strong positive relationship between the length and the width of the petal size across these different species. So as the petal length increases, so does the width. So it's positively correlated. This is a fairly standard way to display this type of data. And you can see here it's using both a color variable to emphasize the different species and also the shape of the individual scatter plot dots that are being used here. So we have squares, to have blue squares, we have green triangles, and we have red circles. So you can actually get quite a lot of information here. So that was a fairly simple standard example. We actually did some work assessing the risk of space weather events to the electricity system in the UK. And really I just want to point you to plot A, C, and D, because here we essentially provided a set of visualizations which show the population per electricity substation in the electricity grid, or the number of transformers, or the voltage of those transformers. Sorry, the node count. So the count of transformers per node. But the point is that, so we're able to show using an X and Y latitude, longitude coordinate, the location of that individual node or asset, and then also we're able to use color and the size of the bubble to demonstrate a third or a fourth dimension to the data. So if you go back to here, 3 variables, it demonstrated you could have a bubble chart. And that's kind of what we're showing here. So the size is represented, the third variable is represented by the size of the individual bubble. So here it's population. So understandably, population is clustered around London, and then the Midlands areas, and very, very low population in Scotland. Okay, so please take a minute now to watch Hans Rosling's video on 200 countries, 200 years in 4 minutes. And this is part of the Joy of Stats series. So Hans Rosling's, unfortunately, is no longer with us anymore. But before he died, I did manage to see him present research at a conference, and that was very interesting. And I think now it's very commonplace to show this type of information in this way, but if you look at what he was doing, so I think this presentation goes back to 2007, 2008, 2009, when he first started visualizing data in this way. It was really kind of revolutionary what he was showing, because he had so many different dimensions of data being shown on a single plot over time. So he'll show the relationship between income, so how wealthy a country is, and the life expectancy. But he also manages to show the size of the population, for example. And there's a lot of information going on there, but it's done in a really nice way. So I think it's worthwhile just watching him, because he's able to show you how the data changes over time, while also creating a nice narrative explaining what is happening. And if we could all be as eloquent as he is, and demonstrate the statistics in this way, then we'd all be in a very strong situation. So do please take your time to watch that video. Okay, so moving on, so let's look at comparisons. So it depends how many items you have. So here I'm just taking the left-hand side of the slide first. So it's focusing on the comparison across items, and this could include variable width column charts, bar charts, as we're looking at here, or column charts as well. Let's move on. So just to give you an example of where I've used these types of charts. In my postdoc, we did an assessment of the United States, and focusing on the risk from extreme weather events. So for those of you who are doing physical geography, you probably might have studied hurricanes, certain natural disasters such as that, or earthquakes, whereas hurricanes happen almost annually. In fact, I think there's a pretty bad one happening right now, unfortunately, in the Gulf of Mexico. Space weather events happen far less frequently, and it's very much under-researched in comparison. So we did this project, and we just explored what would happen if the electricity system was knocked out in certain areas across the United States, and it was a state-level analysis. And generally, you can see here the footprints that we tested using the model. And these footprints are based on the geophysical footprint of the storm, which for a geomagnetic disturbance as this would generally be a band across the US, which is why it's forming this shape. And we're able to look at the number of daily customers, so that's you and I, households without electricity, as well as business customers, industrial customers who don't have electricity. And then we're able to quantify the direct economic loss and the indirect economic loss, so we know what the potential economic impact would be to gross domestic product if this event took place. So anyway, I used a set of bar plots to demonstrate the comparative loss across industrial sectors in the United States. So you can see here that on the y-axis, as this is ordinal data, sorry, it's nominal data. The categories go on the y-axis, And then on the x-axis we have the daily lost value, so the daily lost value added to the economy. So this is known as gross value added. So this is how much lost productivity, economic production took place as a result of this blackout. But the key point here is that you're able to demonstrate for all of these different categories what the potential impacts would be, and that's pretty strong. I mean, the use of these types of charts is pretty common across the sciences, and you know, this is a good way to demonstrate those comparisons if you need to show them in this way. So that was the bar chart comparison that I demonstrated. So just over here, and now I'm going to show you so a line chart. So before it was just a single snapshot time period, whereas over here I want to show change over time. And this is important. So we'll be focusing very much on spatial data in the module, but change over time is central to geography. It's also central to this kind of spatio-temporal analytics that the faculty has a lot of expertise in at George Mason University. So we really do want to capture that additional temporal perspective. So just to give you an example here of how I've done that using a line chart. So on the x-axis here, you can see that we have the years. So from 1990 all the way up to about 2015. What I'm plotting here on the y-axis is actually the penetration rate. So this is the adoption rate for internet subscribers. So how many people are on the internet per year? Essentially, it's per 100 people. So you can think of this as the adoption rate in percentage terms. And this is for the top 6 economies. So we can see early on, as you move through this, that the US is out ahead with a much higher penetration adoption rate of internet services until about the early 2000s, where most of these economies start to reach a comparative level in terms of their adoption rate. And then as we progress over to about 2015, most of the high-income economies or high-income countries are all in the same place. China's a different story because it's taking a different development path. It's catching up very rapidly from about 2005 onwards. But the key point here is that you're able to demonstrate how a variable changes over time by plotting it in this way, and you're able to show how that takes place for a number of different categories, which here I've demonstrated as countries. So I think that this is a nice way to demonstrate time series data. So I've given you an example of how you might plot data from at least one of these different dimensions for plotting visualizations. And I think that that's a fairly useful start. If you have any further questions about this, then we can pick them up later. But this gives you a systematic way to understand some of the plotting options available to you. I don't want to scare you, but this is a cheat sheet for R data visualization using ggplot2. So ggplot2 stands for Grammar of Graphics Plot 2, the syntax in R is referred to as a grammar of graphics because it provides you with a very, very large amount of parameters to change basically every component within your particular data visualization. So it's very, very powerful. I appreciate there's a lot of information here and I don't want to bombard you. I just want to point you to the fact that for all of the data chart types that we've emphasized already, you can basically create all of them using the syntax that's listed here. So it depends whether you're plotting one variable or two variables or three variables, but essentially this would provide you with an overview for how to do pretty much everything. So you need to have an understanding of ggplot and what that enables you to do. And you'll see here that the syntax is written in a particular way. And we'll pick this up in the lab session, which I'm going to cover and upload at a later date. But I do just want to plonk this here so that you have this cheat sheet available to you. And I've put the link to it just down here in the slides. So just to finish then, there is also a broader question of why we do quantitative analysis, and this is a bit more focused on your own professional development. So my question here is, well, how can this help your career? And actually, I've taken this plot from this website, which essentially shows the median starting salary and also the mid-career salary for people graduating from different college degrees. So the mid-career salary is 10 years after graduation. But essentially, if you look down the class list, you can see that generally in the top half of the distribution, those degrees are generally much more quantitative. So they're essentially sciences, technology, engineering, mathematics, and they provide some of the highest starting salaries and also some of the highest long-term salaries. Whereas if you then look at the bottom half of the distribution, generally these are less quantitative subjects, and often the salaries are actually lower. So just to give you an example, when I started doing statistics, I probably wasn't that interested in it. And actually over time, I realized how powerful it is. Quantitative methods underpin how we built the internet. And as a consequence, you can have both a highly rewarding career using these techniques and also a well-paid career. Importantly, though, it's important for me to emphasize that it's not all about money. And I put the caveat down here at the bottom. I fully respect anyone who's not interested in earning money, but it does help. And that's why I wanted to emphasize this to you, that by doing well in this class and actually developing your coding and your quantitative skills, it provides you the better salary, also better job conditions. Often you're able to dictate to your employer the terms upon which you want to work, and that's really powerful. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to thank you very much for tuning in for what was the third part of the first lecture. So I'm going to follow up with the lab work which we're going to do, and that's going to be uploaded in due course. But thank you very much for tuning in. Go and have a break now, get a glass of water, something to eat, and relax. And please remember that there is an associated reading with this, and that's chapter 1 in the course textbook. So it's this one here, it's the McGrew et al. 2014 Statistical Problem Solving in Geography. So without much further ado, I'll thank you, and I'll say goodbye. Goodbye.